Let's talk about anonymization of data. That's used as a somewhat of a get-out clause for people, but of course that's getting more and more difficult to do the more intricate the data we collect is. Toby, what's your view on that?
Anonymization on a single data set tends to be very simple. You might just strip my name and my postcode, and that would suffice. But the problem in the world of big data is we can aggregate, and we can aggregate again, and we can aggregate with unexpected data sets. And each time we do this, we have yet more data, which as we bring it together can focus in on one individual. De-anonymization really came to the market in about 2006 with a study where a team of researchers was able to take a live data feed from Netflix and use that to de-anonymize the borrowing habits of some of the users and to work out who those users were. Now, in the US, that's a very significant piece of legislation that they were able to overcome. So we now know that de-anonymization is quite possible. And it's happening increasingly in mobile telematics technologies. It's happening even in genetics, with studies being able to take anonymized DNA information and work out to whom that DNA must belong. So what we can be certain of is that any data we've anonymized today could be de-anonymized in the future.
Yes.
And that's got big implications for privacy, because the companies are worried about big data and this growth of information, this big asset they have. I'm worried about a tiny datum within it,
yes,
which is the information that's about me. And I need to know that they're not going to be able to use that anonymized big data to reassign that information to myself. And it has really meaningful implications for the individual. Imagine being able to take a fully anonymized health set, work out who the high-risk individuals are, and you receive a letter saying we're withdrawing your health insurance because we've decided you're in fact high risk.
Now that very example leads me to a question, which is de-anonymization always a problem? If you got a letter from your health insurer saying you're not going to be covered because you're high risk of this, obviously that's a problem. But if you got a letter from your health provider saying you're at high risk of this, please come in and we'll give you a scan, stroke, whatever.
Yes.
Is de-anonymization always a problem?
And that's the social balancing act, where we don't yet have a moral compass in place for what does the greater good look like. If I can take a data set in order to find a paedophile, or use the same data set in order to pursue someone for their tax,
yes,
which one of those is acceptable?
So are you putting it in a context of saying it's the ethical use of that information rather than the purpose of
Yes,
anonymization?
because the information will have new purposes in the future.
I can see a lot of benefits in this actually, in traffic. You figure out it's anonymized data, a lot of traffic, and then in a month's time you see a letter saying to you, we know you travel these routes, it's going to be blocked next 2 months, change route.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
But equally I could receive letters saying, here are your speeding tickets for the last month in one easy to digest letter, because we've gone back through your records and picked out where you were misbehaving.
more like to be an email, I think.
Yeah,
so.
but the thing is, I don't want to
Personal
touch on
message.
speeding because I think it's a legal element. There is a legal requirement for me to follow speed. So they, in a way, they're not breaking the law, but they're pushing insight and.
But these are the unforeseen consequences of having the data. As soon as we say we could do something good with it, we then discover something bad we can do.
Yeah, it's the unintended consequence of what you're trying to do with that data. But I think it goes back to who is actually using that data for what purpose. You know, if it is the government trying to find a terrorist, they can go and look at any data because you're protecting the, in the UK, or if it's somebody looking for a paedophile, fine. You know, if it's the police, it's the marketing company in your example that says, actually, I've collected this data and you didn't know about it, and now I've done a risk assessment. I think you have the right to say to the marketing company, how did you come to that assessment? How did you get to that assessment to assess me, and where did you get it from? You know, I'm fine for you to talk to my doctor, and I'm fine for you to talk to, for me to do a medical, but the fact that you've come to an assessment about me, about my health, based on based on looking at anonymised data, but also my digital trail that I thought was, is not anonymised, then that's the key. That's the key in the debate, isn't it?
And the other big problem we get is not just de-anonymisation, but fallibility. there's always an assumption that data is infallible, it must be correct.
Yeah.
And as soon as the human element comes in, as soon as there's a miskeyed data field, transposed data, something incorrect in a record, again we get these unforeseen, unintended consequences,
Yes.
which can be meaningless to the data provider and huge for the individual.
Yes.
An example that was in the headlines a few years back was the use of land registry records, misuse of land registry records, to literally steal people's houses out from under them, to take mortgages without permission. Now, it only happened a few times, and the government dismissed it as it's a tiny little fraud. It's a very big fraud for someone who's just had a mortgage taken out on their house and is being pursued for the payments.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, interesting.
Well, credit check is a classic, isn't it? So you have a credit check, and it's up to you to make sure that there isn't a bad reference or thing, and it's up to you to go and police that. You can go and police your own credit check. You can see that coming in the future about data. There is some data about me on the internet. How can I check that? How can I make it sure? And I am happy for people to use that to market to me or whatever I need to do. I think that's quite key. I can see that coming in.
And back to the point we had earlier about the ICO, the big problem is when these things go wrong.
Yes.
Where do I start trying to get redress? How do I put things straight again?
Yes. Absolutely.
So we really do need a more intelligent regulatory mechanism than we have now.
Yeah. Okay. Now, as we have a CIO and a marketing guru here, this is a good question perhaps to just think about, which is how the marketing function and the CIO function work together with slightly differing aims in the use of data. How does that work in practice?
From a marketing point of view or from an insight and analytics point of view, we tend to work within the boundary of data protection. So we work with data with openness and transparency, complying with basic data privacy. I would say probably most of the analysis, not 100% of the analysis is done at aggregated level. So it's to drive the insight of behavior. When it comes to targeting, then the law and the data privacy comes into act, whether we are allowed to contact and communicate to people and comply with the client's consent and data privacy.
Yeah.
Well, at S3, I chair the data committee, and what it is a data committee. And what I did is I made sure the head of marketing's on there, the head of legal, head of HR, and myself. And then we will debate, we will talk about, and it's not just privacy, it's about what's our view on social media, what's our use of Twitter, what's our use of Facebook, are we happy with consumerisation? Are we happy that employees have mobile devices? Are we happy that can we have apps on those mobile devices? Do we want to control the mobile devices? So that debate, I think now, certainly as a CIO, I felt I had to get everybody involved in that because I think it cuts right across the organisation, whether you're talking about training, you're talking about things. So out of that, we came up with a social media policy. How do our recruitments use Twitter, for instance? How do they use Facebook? From a marketing perspective, what do we put on our website? What's our and the websites are about right from how we go about recruiting new recruitments. So as S3 to the brands and what the brands do.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that sounds like good practice. Is it common practice? I wonder.
I don't know. I think that you see CIOs in other organisations. You have chief data officers, don't you? CDOs. So I think people go about it different ways. But for me, I think you as a PLC, you had to get the key people involved in all of these because it's not just about privacy. It is about mobile devices, BYOD, social media. All of those are really, if you look about IT. Those are the big forces. I mean, Gartner will talk about the nexus of forces where it's consumerisation, social media, cloud, big data, and I think all of those coming together. You've got to look at it across all of it, and you often find they're intertwined. That's what I was finding. It's not just about marketing; it's about or HR policy. It's the fact that actually your cloud, as you're moving infrastructure into the cloud and social media and data, where's the data going? They are all intertwined. Yeah, so it's for me, it was about getting a group of people to be that. That's why. So I think for me, the CIO role does change. It's moved from just worrying about IT to being heavily involved in the business, but actually heavily involved in these issues now and sort of driving these.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's been some interesting points come out of that, gentlemen, and also some practical ideas that we could perhaps take forward for the future. So, Toby, Walid, Lance, thank you very much for speaking to us
Thank
today.
you. Thank you.